The case file marked federal interest. In the quiet town of Red Hollow, life moved at a predictable pace, and violent crime was something residents only read about in distant headlines. Until morning, a local maintenance worker discovered the body of 27-year-old Emily Harper behind abandoned grain silos. A lifelong resident with no known enemies, Emily's death stunned the community and exposed a complex web of interstate deception, digital evidence, and calculated manipulation. What began as a small-town homicide quickly escalated into a federal investigation, revealing how trust, technology, and mobility were exploited, and ultimately demonstrating that even the most peaceful towns are not immune to crimes that cross state lines. Nestled between stretches of farmland and winding highways, it seemed immune to the chaos of the outside world. With fewer than 4,000 residents, most people knew each other by name, often by family history, and crime, especially violent crime, was treated as a distant concern, something that happened elsewhere. For decades, the town had been defined by routine, a comforting predictability, and a collective sense of safety that was rarely challenged. That illusion of security ended abruptly on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The discovery came not from a law enforcement officer, but from a county maintenance worker taking an unfrequented service road behind the abandoned grain silos on the outskirts of town. The silos, relics from a bygone era, had been decommissioned years before and now stood like rusted sentinels, their shadows stretching long in the early morning sun. As he walked toward a patch of overgrown weeds, he noticed something that at first appeared to be discarded clothing. Closer inspection revealed the chilling truth. It was a human body, lying face down in the dirt. Local authorities were notified immediately. Patrol cars arrived, their lights flashing in the soft morning haze. Officers cautiously approaching the scene. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze, cordoning off the area around the silos. The sight was unfamiliar to the small police department, which had not dealt with a homicide in over a decade. The victim was a young woman, her identity unknown at the time, but the gravity of the discovery was palpable. Word spread quickly, and the townspeople of Red Hollow, accustomed to the rhythm of quiet life, were suddenly confronted with a reality they had never imagined. The victim was later identified as Emily Harper, a 27-year-old lifelong resident of Red Hollow. Emily had lived in town all her life, worked at a modest insurance office downtown, and volunteered occasionally at local church events. She lived alone in a small rented home a few blocks from the town center. Friends describe her as responsible, kind, and unassuming. There was nothing in her past to suggest she had been in danger. No criminal record, no documented disputes, no recent unusual behavior. Her death sent shockwaves through the community. Red Hollow had lost a daughter of the town, and the question on everyone's mind was simple yet terrifying. Who could have done this? The medical examiner arrived later that morning to examine the body. The findings were conclusive and troubling. Emily had been strangled. There were no defensive wounds, and the body showed no signs of struggle at the location where it was found. This indicated that she had likely been killed elsewhere and transported to the grain silos afterward. Her jewelry remained intact, and no money had been taken, effectively ruling out robbery as a motive. Her purse and phone were missing, however, suggesting a planned act rather than a spontaneous one. Investigators faced immediate challenges. The evidence at the scene was limited, and the town lacked the resources or experience to handle a case of this magnitude. Local police began the investigation methodically, starting with what they knew best: the people. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, speaking with friends, family, co-workers, and neighbors. Emily's house showed no signs of forced entry. No broken doors, no overturned furniture, nothing to suggest a struggle. Her car remained parked neatly in the driveway, undisturbed. The implication was clear. Emily likely left her home voluntarily. Whoever she left with had been trusted, someone she knew or believed she knew. The realization unsettled investigators. It also unnerved the town, as residents began to consider that danger could arrive not from a stranger in the shadows, but from someone familiar. As days passed, the case remained stagnant. Witnesses could offer little. Emily had last been seen in town the previous evening at a local grocery store, purchasing groceries as she often did. Beyond that, no one could account for her movements. But then, a small yet significant detail emerged from her financial records. Shortly after midnight on the night she disappeared, a minor purchase had been made at a gas station nearly 40 miles away, just across the state line. Emily rarely drove at night, let alone such a distance. The transaction was an anomaly that suggested her movements were being influenced by someone else. Investigators requested the gas station surveillance footage. What they found changed the trajectory of the case. Emily's vehicle appeared at the station, parked at the pump. Standing near the passenger side was a man, partially obscured by the camera angle. His face could not be fully seen, but his presence was unmistakable. Emily appeared calm, composed, and unafraid. There were no signs of struggle. She had not acted out of fear, which reinforced the initial belief that she had left home willingly. The evidence now suggested something far more complicated. Emily had traveled with someone she knew across state lines. With this development, local authorities realized they had reached the limits of their capacity. State investigators were contacted, and additional resources were deployed. Phone records were subpoenaed, traffic cameras along key highways reviewed, and tips from the public solicited. Emily's phone was eventually recovered, damaged, but containing vital data. Analysis revealed repeated calls to a single number in the hours leading up to her disappearance. That number belonged to Thomas Keller, a man living nearly 200 miles away in a neighboring state. Keller initially claimed to have a minimal connection to Emily. He stated that they had met briefly at a professional conference months prior and had exchanged contact information. According to him, they had not kept in touch and had no recent interaction. However, digital evidence quickly contradicted this account. Phone logs, text records, and social media interactions revealed weeks of communication, including long late-night conversations. Under scrutiny, Keller revised the story but maintained that the relationship had never progressed beyond casual conversation. He insisted he had not seen Emily recently. Further investigation revealed Keller's vehicle had entered Red Hollow the night Emily disappeared. License plate readers, traffic camera footage, and toll records corroborated his movements. GPS data, obtained through a warrant, placed his vehicle on rural roads near the location where Emily's phone was later discovered. Keller's own statements were increasingly inconsistent with digital and physical evidence. At this point, the case was formally marked federal interest. The FBI assumed control of the investigation due to its interstate implications and the mounting evidence of premeditation. Federal agents brought specialized resources, including behavioral analysts, forensic data recovery teams, and investigative support. Keller's patterns of communication and travel were carefully examined. Analysts noted a disturbing pattern. Keller frequently formed relationships with women in smaller towns during work trips, often exerting control and aggression when rejected. Several women later came forward, describing similar experiences, though none had previously reported him to law enforcement. Investigators determined that Emily had likely been attempting to distance herself from Keller. Phone records showed missed calls from the night she disappeared, followed by a brief outgoing call from Emily shortly before leaving her home. The absence of forced entry reinforced the conclusion that she met him voluntarily. Forensic analysis of Keller's vehicle revealed microscopic blood traces consistent with Emily's DNA and fibers matching her clothing. Although the interior had been cleaned, modern forensic techniques detected these subtle traces. Cell phone location data placed Keller near the grain silos during the early morning hours of Emily's disappearance, contradicting his earlier statements. Keller was arrested at his apartment without incident. During questioning, he declined to make additional statements and requested legal counsel. Investigators then focused on digital evidence stored in cloud accounts. Although Keller had attempted to delete relevant files, forensic recovery revealed location history and message fragments that reconstructed his movements with remarkable detail. These records formed the backbone of the federal prosecution's case. The trial was methodical and evidence-based. Prosecutors presented a sequential narrative supported by digital records, forensic findings, and expert testimony from behavioral analysts. The defense argued that the case relied on circumstantial evidence and highlighted the absence of eyewitness testimony or confessions. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a guilty verdict. Keller was convicted of murder and interstate kidnapping, resulting in death, and sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. For the town of Red Hollow, the verdict offered a measure of closure, but did not restore the sense of safety that had once defined the community. The FBI eventually departed, media attention waned, and life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Yet, the events of that night and the subsequent investigation left an indelible mark on the town. The case file marked federal interest served as a stark reminder that modern crime often transcends geographic boundaries, and that trust, mobility, and technology can be exploited by those who intend harm. If you found this case informative, please like this video, subscribe for more in-depth true crime stories, and share with others who enjoy investigative narratives. Leave a comment below telling us what stood out to you most or what lessons you learned from this case.